Welcome to another .NET user group with a focus on Blazor from sunny Bournemouth in Dorset, part of the .NET Foundation. Well, it's great that you've been able to join us yet again for another presentation around Azure, .NET and Blazor. So, what have we got in store for you today? Choosing how and where to deploy your Blazor application can be difficult and confusing. Hosting on Azure is an obvious option and well documented, but what about other options? AWS, a Linux host, in a container. In this presentation, you'll learn how to deploy your Blazor application in the spot that's right for you. We'll learn how to put your application into containers and deploy them. We'll cover deploying to AWS and even static hosts like Netlify. We'll examine how to do it and why you'd want to choose each service. We'd also like to say a big thanks to our sponsors, Syncfusion and Spectrum IT, making it possible to do giveaways and have a bit of fun. My name is Randall. I work as a development lead for AssemblySoft, a Microsoft partner based in Bournemouth, UK, primarily delivering specialist ASP.NET, Blazor and Azure applications and solutions. I started the Blazor Meetup group as a means to collaborate and share the latest .NET, Azure and Blazor concepts and development techniques. We have some great speakers who, like me, are passionate about Blazor and serverless technologies. We are really looking forward to this presentation from Jeremy Morgan. Jeremy works for Pluralsight, is a software developer and DevOps practitioner, having spent nearly 2 decades building software and leading teams for organizations ranging from Fortune 100 companies to shoestring startups. Well, we're certainly looking forward to this one. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, pretty much the family and the old trucks and tech keeps me fairly busy. I'm also a volunteer firefighter. So with whatever spare time I have left from that, and that's generally in the middle of the night, we live in an area where 80% of the firefighters are volunteers. So several of us go out we have pagers and we go out on calls and put out fires and do medical stuff. And
wow.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how it is in the UK, but in the United States, the majority of firefighters are volunteer, with the exception of big cities will generally have 4 paid people and volunteers that come in when there's a big fire. But in the smaller towns and smaller cities, they're usually volunteers that get together and run that stuff. So.
Wow, that's really interesting. Actually, 3 of my uncles are firemen, and so it's a bit of history in the family. And there are part-time firemen here as well that kind of are paid, but there's also the volunteers. I think it's a similar kind of structure, but really, really interesting. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very fun, but it's something that's been declining a lot in the United States, mostly due to training. Because we have to have the same amount of training as the paid firefighters do. And they get paid to take that training during their work time, whereas we have to carve our own time out for the training. So every year it gets more difficult for volunteers in the United States, unfortunately.
Wow, amazing. So you're calling or presenting today from Portland, Oregon, is that right?
Yeah.
And,
yep.
and what's it like there today?
Today it's very cold, so it's probably about 0 degrees Celsius, right around there. And it's supposed to snow today, but I'm still just looking out the window hoping it's going to snow. All I see is frost. So, and most of the time in Oregon it rains. If any of you are familiar with it, mostly it rains probably 8 months out of the year. But we have the most beautiful summers ever, so it's kind of a trade-off.
Cool. And what kind of time are you at the moment? It must be about lunchtime, right?
Yep. It's 11:30 a.m. here. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us nice and early. In the UK, it's 7:30 now. So yeah, we really appreciate you making it. So
I appreciate you inviting me. A nice big crowd here. Pretty cool.
yeah, and we'll be recording the event as well. So we'll pop it up onto the YouTube channel as well. We've got a community page on the site if anyone wants to see some of the previous videos. But yeah, if anyone needs to drop off, then at least you'll know it'll be there for future ref as well.
Awesome.
Great. So without further ado, I'm going to make you co-host. Over to you, Jeremy, for part one.
Okay. Share my screen here. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so the title of this presentation is Deploying Your Blazor Application in the Right Spot, which is sometimes Azure, sometimes an IES host, and sometimes something different, which is what we're going to talk about today, is the something different. A little bit about me. I've been a developer for about 20 years professionally, and I've kind of had an even split, and this is probably pretty obvious after this presentation, but I've had an even split between Microsoft and Linux. So I started as a Linux developer, and then at some point in 2008 or 2009, I got into C# and .NET. Absolutely loved it, did that for a long time, but always kind of stayed in the Linux world. So I've kind of done a little bit of both, and worked for a variety of different companies, from very, very large companies to tiny little startups, and everything in between. A lot of what I'm talking about today is probably more applicable to the smaller companies, and we'll talk about that. And the last several years, I've spent a lot of time with DevOps and engineering. So full disclosure, I'm not a super strong Blazor developer, but most of what I've focused on the last few years has been a lot of deployment, continuous integration, things like that. But I absolutely love Blazor and what it offers. And as I said, a good mix of .NET and Linux in my background. And I'll move this over here. So to show what we'll be building, I'll bring up our web API. If everyone's able to see this. Now this API is very, very simple. So it's using let's see, move this, there we go. Sorry, I moved some of my stuff around here. So this is just a basic ASP.NET Web API. Now, if you do a Blazor server application, you can do the API and the static part together. I've decided to separate these because of what we're doing. So I've separated this part out into just basically an ASP.NET Web API. And in here, I'm using Entity Framework to go to a SQLite database. And so that way, this thing is fully self-contained. You could very easily connect this application to like a SQL database or even MySQL, Postgres, things like that. There's a lot of different options. I decided to make this kind of self-contained with this food items database. And we can take a look at that really quick. Whoops. And I probably should have had this open. And to step back a little bit, the Turkey Time application is an application that I generally build when I'm learning something new. And I'll show one iteration of it. There we go, Azure websites. So I have a large family, and when we get together, we often don't know who's going to bring what. And so we, instead of kind of doing like text messages or Facebook messages or things like that, I build these little applications where people can come in and say, you know, my name is Jeremy, and I'm going to bring potato chips. And then we have some folks in my family who are gluten-free and vegetarian, so we can check those off. and then it's just stored here. And then everybody can go there and say, okay, well, you know, Rick is bringing homemade baked meat and beans, so I'll come up with something else. And so this is just kind of a little demo application that I like to do when I'm learning something new. And so that's what I've done here is I've done this with Blazor. This is the data backing on it, which is just ID, the name of what you're bringing, person bringing it, and then whether it's gluten-free or vegetarian or not. So I will talk about some of the things that you have to do to this in order to make it run on Linux. One of the things is default target OS. You can change the targeting when you build it, but this just makes it a little bit easier if you change the default target OS for that. What are some other things that I've had to do here? For my CORS policy, I added in allow any origin method or header because we're going to set up this web API and then connect to it from all of these different sources. So in a production application, you wouldn't want to do this, but this is how I have it set up right now so that we don't have any CORS issues or anything like that. Another thing that I've had to do that's a little bit different is when I'm loading this food items database, you see right here where I have path parameterized and I have the get directory name. And so I'm using reflection to grab the current directory and put it in there. That really helps when I drop this thing into a container and push that container out. It doesn't have to go and try to look for food items. If I put it on a Linux host or a Windows host, it doesn't have to kind of look around. And one of the ways that I've done this in the past that was kind of clunky was I had a switch. If we're in Linux, we'll use this slash. If we're in Windows, we'll use this slash. This way you don't have to do that. So this is one of the additional things that I've added where I can grab in that path in the data source. Let's see. And I don't think, oh yeah, and I'm doing the same thing here in the DB context so that you can just kind of grab it and go. And I'll show you what this looks like. And this is just a regular old web API. It's dumping out some JSON here. That's great. Let's see what it looks like in a container. Select Docker. Now here's one of the cool things about using Visual Studio. So I like using the .NET CLI. I'm a huge fan of CLIs in general, and the .NET CLI is awesome. But one of the advantages to using full Visual Studio is they build things like Docker containers for you, the definitions and everything. So here now we're running it out of a Docker container, and it's the same thing. It's kind of just a JSON dump there. And I think I opened up the wrong one. There we go. And this comes from this Docker file. These are things that I've built a million of these things by hand before without knowing that I could just click enable Docker support when starting Visual Studio, and it builds this out for you. But in here, you can create these by hand, and it just pulls an image like this one. We're using ASP 3.1. Now, the reason I'm using 3.1 as opposed to 5 is for Azure support. If we want to deploy this thing to Azure, Azure still doesn't support 5 yet. So when I was putting this together, I used 3.1. And let's see. We can also do IS Express. And right now I'm just testing to make sure this thing runs. Like that Docker container is a Linux container. IS Express is obviously Windows. And it looks like we can run this application on anything. So I have this in a Git repository. And I'll push it. So this is pretty much key for all of this, and I'm probably preaching to the choir. Don't have to tell anyone this, but using some kind of repository like Git really makes things handy and useful when you're building things like this. So we'll go to Turkey Time API. And this is my Git repository for this code. And what I'm going to do is deploy it to an Amazon Lightsail service. So if you've never used Amazon Lightsail before, basically these are very small. Actually, I'll show the creation of it. You just create it as a very small kind of virtual server. So you can use Linux and Unix. I do OS only. I've selected Ubuntu. And then there's a couple of SSH keys. And as you can see here, the pricing is really good for these. So the machine I'm using is $3.50 USD a month that has 512 RAM a meg, or 512 meg of RAM, one little CPU, 20 gig space. I mean, that's plenty for a Blazor application or tons of Blazor applications. So one of the reasons you would want to use this, use like an Amazon Lightsail or DigitalOcean or Linode. There's several of these virtualized private servers. One of the reasons you'd want to do this if you're doing something custom that just doesn't quite fit into like an application, like a Azure web instance or something like that, where let's say you've got some cron jobs you want to run, or you have something in Python that you have to talk to, anything different. These machines here are just basic Linux machines. You can also do Windows machines with it, and you have full control over the environment for a very low price. So this is kind of an old school way of doing it. So the only disadvantage to doing it this way is you have a full Linux system, right? So you have to administer it. You have to keep up on updates, things like that. And then the scalability factor comes in. So if we compare this to, say, an Azure web instance, with Azure web instance, you don't have to update Windows. You don't have to manage users. You don't have to manage permissions. You don't have to manage anything. You just have to push the application and watch it run. Whereas with something like this, you have that maintenance overhead. So you're trading the overhead of having to run your own Linux or Windows server and administer it, trading that for something custom or just wanting to save money. Like if you just want to do $3.50 and forget about it, this is an excellent way to do it. So here's how we connect. We use PuTTY. I'll make sure I've got my keys in there. Yep. And so this machine, all I've done is I spun up this machine, I pointed the DNS to it with Route 53, and then I ran some updates. So this is just a bare bones, fresh Linux machine that for some reason doesn't want to open. So we can make sure my DNS is correct. Three. Let's see. Morgan.dev. It's going to be Turkey demo, and it looks like my DNS is off, which may cause a problem. Oh, nope, I was wrong. It is correct. Okay. Cool. So it should be turkeydemo.jeremymorgan.dev. I'll just use the IP address just to be sure. Make sure this thing is up and available. Okay, so I prefer to use PuTTY. However, it looks like for some reason, so we'll just go in and see why. For some reason, it doesn't want to let me connect with PuTTY. Make sure ports are open. So we're going to use the browser-based client for this. And one of the first things I'll do is install Git. Create a directory, repos. Perfect. And then I'm going to clone in this Turkey Time API repository. And this just makes it easier. You can use things like SCP or PSCP. There are different ways you can transfer files over. I definitely prefer to just use the Git repository for this. Clone. Okay. And now we've cloned our Turkey Time API in here. So the next thing I will do is we'll install Docker on here and see if we can run this in a Docker container. Update. And I've got a ton of notes over here because for some reason I forget everything once I get on camera or get on stage in front of people. So I've got a pile of notes here. And while this is installing, I'll check the chat. Oops.
All good so far, Jeremy.
And it looks like my notes may not have been that great. So sudo apt-get install apt. Agent. Then I've got a little thing here. If you've ever installed Docker on Ubuntu, it's pretty easy and pretty fast, I would say, comparatively. Like I said, this is just a base machine. So add that repository. And I totally messed up. Okay, now we're adding in the Docker repositories to our Ubuntu installation. Git update. Now we should be able to install Docker. CLI. Probably misspelled that. D. And this is installing Docker, the Docker CLI, and then Containerd, which is a daemon that runs these containers. And I'm going to check the chat room really quick because let's see. Actually, I don't know if I can see the chat room. So maybe people have to yell out questions.
Nothing yet, Jeremy. You're good. Everyone's trying to keep up at the moment.
Okay. So one of the things that we need to do here on most machines, I think, is add a group. So let's see. Okay, cool. I'll add myself to that. Docker. Okay. So now let's see if Docker is working properly. And there's our Docker hello world that shows it's ostensibly working properly. So we'll go into our turkey time API. Make sure our Docker file is here. And if you're familiar with Docker files, this is the one that I showed earlier from Visual Studio. Visual Studio pretty much built this for me. And we're going to trust that it was correct. Okay, so Docker build. We'll call this turkey time version 1. Oh, and we got permission denied. So I need to log out and reconnect. So I had to add myself to that Docker group, and that doesn't take effect until I log in and log back out again. So that's why we got that little error, if you ever see that error. Docker build -t time v1. We want to use our current Docker file, and now it's pulling down from the Docker images that Microsoft provides, which is pretty awesome. So this image that we're pulling from has .NET Core. It has some of the SDK stuff in it. It has all the things you need to run Blazor applications or .NET Core applications within your Docker container. Okay, and that's doing the restore. So here's one of the cool things. So we're running on this cheap Linux machine and running a little container. So it's not extremely scalable. However, if you're building things in containers and running them from containers, you can always push that out. You can get other servers, start spinning up more of those $5 a month servers or whatever, connect them all together with Docker Swarm or Kubernetes. If your small project all of a sudden becomes a big, heavily trafficked project, there are options. And so that's one reason you would want to Dockerize this, is basically be able to move it from cloud to cloud or expand. If you're lucky enough to have your small project all of a sudden get a ton of traffic. Okay. And it looks like the build returned a non-zero code. Let's try that again. return non-zero code. What image is this thing pulled down? Publish. As we look through, it looks like it's pulling in ASP.NET, pulling in SDK. One thing I might have to do is we'll install the .NET framework and core on this machine and make sure that it builds on this machine. It's really hard to tell why it's doing that with that super helpful, friendly error message. So if this doesn't work, actually that is part of the plan to install the .NET framework on here in .NET Core, so we'll just skip ahead to that part. I'll give it another second here.
I think we all appreciate you being brave enough to take this on live, Jeremy.
Make sure it's not frozen. And I'll go ahead and cancel it for now. So we're going to install .NET Core. We'll do the web, the ASP.NET and the SDK onto this Ubuntu server so that we can run this application. So we've already done a sudo apt update. Now I'm going to copy down the deb file from Microsoft. So it's kind of interesting. Ubuntu is a Linux distribution that's based off of Debian. So we're using Debian commands. And I always find it interesting when I find Linux distributions, like one of the ones that I really like is Pop! OS, which is based off Ubuntu, which is based off Debian. And it's kind of funny to see how those things chain. So we're dpackage -i. Install that. We'll do another update. I'm going to copy and paste some of these in to save a little time. And this is straight from the Microsoft website for instructions on how to install this in Ubuntu. Install our SDK. And this should be everything we need, but sometimes I install the runtime also just to make sure. And it looks like we've got the .NET runtime going here. So we'll we'll go into our little repo here. We'll just type docker run and see if it runs. Or not docker run, .NET run. Check here. Try just .NET build. I suspect I may have a build error in here that I need to fix. Okay, there we go. So now it's listening on port 5000. And one of the things you will have to do is open up some ports on these machines. 1000. Add 5001. 443. Okay. Now we should be able to see, according to this, we should be running at port 5000. I don't see it yet, so we'll open up an additional terminal and test this out a little bit. I have curl in here. -V. And it is showing our Kestrel server there. So I know what to do. We'll use wget. And right now I'm just trying to verify that this is able to build, which it looks like it's able to build. It's able to run. And so I will show you how we put it into a Linux service so that it will automatically start up and it'll restart if it fails and things like that to kind of make it a real service. And then we'll do an Nginx proxy on the front of it to proxy in the connections, and we'll make it a secure connection. As soon as I install wget. So while that thing is going, I know I'm probably getting that flag wrong, so I'll just run wget. No check certificate. I was close. Okay. 5,000. Not found. What I'm doing is checking it locally because I'm not finding it from my browser.
Jeremy, you used locally the API endpoint. Here you use version 1. Have you versioning on in .NET Core, or maybe you mistaken the URL in the Linux machine?
Just to make absolute sure. I'll shut it down again. Restart it up. Make sure I'm working with the right project here. /API. So that could be it. It's the routing. There we go. So I didn't have the route correct, but as I'm using wget here, it's pulling down these files, which are just the raw JSON as it comes out of the API. So now that we know we can connect locally, I will check my browser.
Chrome.https.
And my browser may block it because I don't have a certificate set up yet, but we are going to fix that. All right, so we'll just go straight to throwing the certificate in there. So now that I know that this thing builds, I know that it serves out JSON, as I was able to prove here, then I know this is pretty much good to go where I'd like it. So now I want to turn it into a Linux service that's going to be running all the time. And so how we'll do that is systemd system, and then I'm going to name this Turkey API service. And hopefully I can paste this in here from my notes so that you don't have to watch me type all of it, but I'll explain what each of it does. There we go. Perfect. So this is a systemd service file, which, I'm not sure why that's in there twice. So in here we have a description of what the service is going to be. It's going to be Turkey time. Our working directory, which will be home, Ubuntu, apps, Turkey API, and then how to start it up. This is one of the things that I learned a long time ago when doing these services is if you do just .NET Turkey time API DLL, for some reason that secured URL won't pop up. It'll only be the unsecure or insecure URL. And I'm sure there's a really good reason for that. I didn't know what it was, so I just started specifying the URL here. And I'm putting 0.0.0 so that it's exposed to the outside world as we're running it. And then here's the signals we can use to kill it. the user we run under, and then you can put in some of your environment variables here. And yeah, this is a just basic service file so that we can make this into a service. Now, one of the things I will have to do is build this into apps. So make sure I have everything I need here. We'll do .NET build. We'll build this as a release. And apps. The API, which I don't think I created. And we'll go ahead and build this thing. And sometimes I like to just run checks as I'm going along, and I'll fire it up again. I need to looks like it is going to make it. So we'll let this build here, and then all we'll need to do at that point, once I have this, I'll build, push the artifacts into apps. We've got a service built, so I can start up that service, so the API will be running from that point forward. And then all we have to do is some quick stuff with Nginx to make a proxy and install a certificate, and then we'll have a secured API ready to go on a Linux server as soon as this thing builds, which seems like it's taking a little while, but could be my imagination. Close this window because it kind of seems like it's frozen. Try connecting through PuTTY again. I really want to use PuTTY for this. Let's go ahead and open up another terminal and see what's going on. This isn't looking very good for light sail right now, I realize, but generally it doesn't act like this. Oh, it looks like I'll go ahead and open up the chat window while we're waiting. Wherever it went. I still don't see the chat window. Okay. So let's see if I can figure out why on earth this thing is freezing like this. These out. And I see what, so here's one of the things that's really interesting about Amazon Lightsail, and I don't like to bash when I'm doing presentations. However, as we can see, this IP address has changed on me since we started this presentation, and I have it set to use a static IP. If I can find that. But it did not keep my static IP. Oh, there it is. Yeah, static IP2. But it looks like this IP address has changed just since we've started using this, which of course can cause problems. I'm able to get in through PuTTY. And since my IP address has changed, I'll have to change my DNS, otherwise our certificates are not going to work. It's quite unfortunate that it's not holding on to the IP the way it should. And I do have some production applications on Lightsail services where I haven't had this problem, but demo. Edit this. Put in our new IP address. And hopefully the certificate will work when we do this. Hopefully it'll be a few minutes, but now we at least have PuTTY. So I'm going to make sure that .NET isn't running. Let's build. And then we'll try to build this again. There we go. That's a little more like it. That's kind of what I expected. So go into apps. The API. All right. Turkey Time API. And again, I'm just making sure that this thing builds and runs before we make a service out of it. Systemctl status Turkey API. And it looks like our Turkey API is already up and running. So that was that service that we just created. Let's do a wget verify before we move forward. Refused. So and it shows that it's dead. I don't know what happened there. We'll start it up again. Okay, so our Turkey API is up and running. Got this little output file. Okay, cool. Looks like it's up and running. So now we need to install Nginx to clear this out. Back in my notes. And so now I'm going to do what's called the reverse proxy, and we're going to use Nginx to reverse proxy into this, and then we'll add a certificate to it. And actually, we'll probably add the certificates first before we do the reverse proxy. So where's my little PuTTY window? So let's install Nginx really quick. And hopefully our DNS is propagated in the last 5 minutes. It's possible. And not quite yet. But we'll check. Turkey test, Turkey demo. Okay, so we do have Nginx up here. And Nginx is just a static file service. So hopefully the DNS will catch up. Turkey test. And it's still showing the old IP address, which is going to cause a problem with our certification. But we'll start installing it anyway. So for this, I'm going to use Let's Encrypt certificates. These are free certificates that are given out. It's a nonprofit that's run off donations. So I really like to use Let's Encrypt a lot, and I've donated to them just to say thanks rather than buying a certificate for all of my silly projects that I have. I could easily bankrupt myself probably. So this is a really good way of building certificates that are pretty good. Certbot. And my email address. Okay, so our certbot is now up and running. So I'm going to add in our domain name to Nginx. So Etsy, Nginx sites available. And we're just going to use the default website for this. You can do all of this in a container, by the way, if you really want to. So listen, AD default server. So for the server name, we decided was going to be turkeydemo.jeremymorgan.dev. And for now, I believe this is all I will have to modify. Load Nginx. Okay, so our Nginx is up. Test is up. This is what the application will look like. But we need turkey demo, which still isn't. So there we go. So now it's showing the new IP address. And that may be enough to run certbot. Let's find out. What certbot does is just kind of verifies. So it'll say, what do you want to activate HTTPS for? We want to activate it for this domain. It pulled it out of my Nginx configuration. And then what it will do is the certificate authority will come back to this server. It'll drop a file, and then the certificate authority will come back to the server to make sure that I'm generating a certificate for myself and that I'm authorized to do that. So we'll see if this verification works. This is entirely dependent on our DNS propagating. So I may have to try it a few times. Let's see, I'll push this over here and I'll keep trying here. So my DNS on my machine has not updated, so let's see. Oh, and it did work. Awesome. So at this point, all I've had to do is run sudo certbot, and it'll set up a redirect for me. So I'll put in 2 for redirect. And now this will route everything from port 80 to a secure port, which, as I refresh, turkeydemo.jeremymorgan.dev, here's our Nginx server. So what we need to do is build the bridge between Nginx, which right now is just a static web host. We need to build the bridge between that and the API that we have running right now. So let's make sure it's still running. Status Turkey API. And it looks like it's still running. So not sure why. So we know that it's running. So what I'm going to do is put in a /API route for this in Nginx, and we'll use Nginx as a proxy to route all of our requests, our /API requests, into this application that we just created. So we'll go in here, create a new location /API, and I have this in my notes so that you don't have to watch me type it. Somewhere in here. Oh, there we go. Perfect. And so if you've never done a reverse proxy through Nginx, it's just a fancy word for routing requests to other ports. So what this is doing is it has my HTTPS localhost 5001, which we tested earlier. We dropped that JSON file out of it. It's using HTTP version 1.1, sets a few headers here, and then it just forwards it to our application. That's what the proxy pass is basically anything that goes to /API should immediately be directed to localhost 5001. We'll write that. And then reload Nginx. Make sure it runs here. And then we'll test our reverse proxy. Okay, and there's our JSON file. So basically, even though I kind of stumbled through that, this is basically how easy it is to spin up a small Linux server. As I said, all I did with that thing is I provisioned the new server, I pointed the DNS to it, which unfortunately broke on us, but and then just updated it, did the sudo apt-get update. So it was from a bare Linux server. Once you get really good at this, you can go from a bare Linux server to an HTTPS secured API endpoint, you know, within 5 or 10 minutes, or I'd say 20 minutes maybe, once you get really good at it. And then we're going to use this API to connect. We can go ahead and have our break here, but we'll use this API and then we'll connect our static application to it. And then we'll deploy that static application and weird stuff. But this is just a really good way, especially if you're doing something that's self-contained, like this is self-contained with the SQLite database. If you're doing something very small and self-contained, this is an extremely economical way to run it. And with the Nginx proxy, the way we have it set up, you could have 20 Blazor apps going on here, 20 API endpoints, or however many the server itself will handle with that CPU and memory. And I know for a fact that this little API isn't using anywhere near 512 gig or multiple cores to serve, so we could really hammer on this thing. But yeah, if we want to take the break, we can then we'll go to the Blazor WebAssembly side and connect that to this and show some kind of cool deployments there. And I'm going to try to bring up this chat room that I'm not able to find. It might work.
Is that a bit better, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Awesome. You did really well there, actually, considering you couldn't hear too much.
Yeah, I need to get AirPods. I mean, everybody's got the AirPods these days, and I've been resisting it because they're a lot of money for 2 tiny little earpieces, but I probably should just get some AirPods like everybody else has.
Interesting about you were saying about Let's Encrypt. How do you overcome the renewals of the certs there? Has that got a bit better? Because I mean, the last time I did it, they were giving like, was it 3 months at a time? And then you end up with like, 20 app services all expiring and needing to go through another process again. It's quite quick to do manually in the portal, but what's the automation story on that?
You can run it with a cron job and have a cron job run, or you can have, there's different services you can have that ping it. I still renew mine manually, mostly just because I want to be there. So I set reminders on my calendar. So I guess it's kind of old school, but I'll set some for like my blog and things that are really important. I'll set it on my calendar, and I like to do the renewals manually, but you can use like a cron job to renew it and have it renew pretty steadily.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot there. There was, for someone standing up a Linux container for the first time, there's quite a bit there. But I think what's quite nice is we've got the recording, and you can go back over it.
Slow it down.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the Nginx stuff for me particularly was really cool. That configuration of the reverse proxy was, really quite straightforward. It's just nice to have that as a reference as well that we did there.
Yeah, and yeah, there's different ways to do that. That's the way that I've found over the years to be the easiest, but there's different ways you can do that depending on how large your setup is. So I put everything in the default, just kind of the default website configuration just to make things easy. But for larger sites, you'll want to break those up and break out the config files. And a lot of people will even break out the things they're proxying for, like where I put in the location API. They'll break that into its own file too, which is a lot better when you have 10,000 websites or something and you really need things organized. But for something like this, you can just jump in that default config and add a few things and it's kind of good to go. And it's really neat. I have one server that is a FreeBSD server, and all Nginx does on it is just proxies to different things. And I have like Python apps and Go apps and .NET Core apps and all of these things running off of this thing. And it's still like, there's times that I kind of step back and be like, this is really impressive. Like this wasn't popular 10 years ago or possible 10 years ago even. But it's really impressive how far some of those things have come. It's really cool.
Yeah, Andrew's put quite a nice link in to the Microsoft Docs in terms of setup there with ASP.NET Core 5 as well. So thanks for that, Andrew. I have actually put together a URL list for tonight. I've been trying to keep up with the items that are in. I'll just pop that into the chat for everyone. And I'll keep it up to date for any bits that pop up as we progress. So have we got any other questions that weren't covered? A couple were just answered as you progress through your presentation there. Thanks for your input, Patrizio, as well. He was desperately feeding you a few potential workarounds when you were midway there. It's a shame you couldn't get the chat going, but it's tricky when you're presenting to see everything. It's difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That probably would have helped. And yeah, usually the chat thing comes up, but for some reason this one didn't want to come up.
Cool. Is there any burning questions we've got? If not, then we'll duck out for a quick round on the wheel of giveaways and let everyone have a little break if you fancy.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably be back in like 5 minutes or so.
Here we go. Hold on tight. Can everyone see the screen? Perfect. Let's give it a spin. Okay, well, that's our sponsor. And the deal we have with the sponsor is if we land on it, we double up on the prize. So that wasn't rigged. So we spin again. Congratulations.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, wow.
No worries. So I'm not sure what that equates to, but it's definitely an Amazon gift card. And I shall do the numbers. If you pass me your email after Peter, and if you want to direct message me or send it over the meetup chat, whichever you want, and I'll make sure that gets to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations. And that is a first. Next time, you've got Dave Brock with his Blast Off with Blazor presentation, which is quite interesting because he's been working on the website Blast Off with Blazor. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but it's worth having a look. I've put it in the URL list actually. A second. So it's this application here. If you want to see basically how this has been put together and some of the mechanics behind it, then this is quite an interesting one from Dave. So yeah, be sure to tune in for that next month. I think that's booked for February the 15th. Have some interesting links on the .NET Foundation page. Definitely worth reviewing if you're a little bit behind on some of these, but some of these workshops are absolutely fantastic. I've been through a few of them. Definitely worth having a look. This C#9 one I found really interesting. You've got some Blazor specific, but even this ASP.NET Core overview, it's amazing what little bits kind of come out of these overviews. They're very light, but quite interesting. And also an interesting one on Xamarin Forms, the extend and optimize as well. But definitely worth keeping your eye out on the list there. In terms of what's upcoming, interesting event on the 27th. So where are we now? 26th is tomorrow, Wednesday. State of .NET. Blazor web development with .NET 5 with Marcus Eager. Definitely worth checking that if you've got the time. If you know Marcus's work, he's a MVP and also he's a Microsoft regional director. But it's quite an interesting bio here, which you can kind of have a look at. And if you've read any of his articles, they're really quite interesting and a little bit of humour in there as well. So. Definitely recommend that one if you've got the opportunity tomorrow. The other one that I picked out this week was from the awesome Blazor site. It's this rapid CMS project. It's quite interesting. Now on the surface, when you go to the demo, it looks a little bit detailed. It's just loading the Blazor application here, but it's essentially this CMS which is built from like a code first style. Quite interesting. Check the code out on this on the repo. Some really interesting patterns that are being used for this project. And certainly if you're looking at the moment at an option of how you could maybe utilize Blazor with a CMS, this is quite interesting. I've been following Piranha CMS for quite some time, and I find that excellent in terms of the .NET Core side. But when it comes to the front end, you kind of want a .NET front end as well that you could kind of play with and maybe share some libraries. And at the moment, the option is Vue, and I think there's an Angular port and some other front end JavaScript libraries, which if you're from a .NET background, just might not be quite suited. So something along this line you might find quite easy to pick up and something you could kind of easily extend as well. The other site which is quite interesting is this Blazor Games site. When you want to read some code, you want to look at some nice patterns, but it's nice to look at something that's just kind of a bit light-hearted sometimes. And this Blazor Games repo on exception not found, it's got some really interesting ports of some of the well-known apps, and just to see some of the rendering and how that's done for like game boards, etc., is quite interesting for some of your own projects. So I recommend that. Again, these are all in the URL list. The identity server for admin, and that's definitely worth us having a look at in terms of some code for managing identity, user admin, etc., that you were talking about as well, Andrew. Be interesting to see how that transpires. And then we've got Jeremy's Turkey Time API. I thought that was quite cool that Jeremy's got like a go-to app for like new tech, because he knows the app, and so there's nothing to really learn there, but he can just apply new knowledge to something that he's really familiar with. I thought that's quite a nice way to approach new technologies. Find an application that works for you, and then extend it for the new technology that you want to explore. Quite a nice way, because you can focus on the new tech and just make those tweaks to fit with an app that you're really familiar with. I put the links in for the light sale, and also the link for the Blast Off Blazor, which we just looked at there, and then some of the other bits that we've covered this evening. So there's the link there. It's just Blazor user group, that URL list for this evening. Okay, so I just scroll through my notes. If anyone wants to grab a quick drink and just have 2 minutes, now's probably quite a good time. Or if you'd like to raise anything or have a chat, feel free to unmute and fire away.
Hi, Carl. So what's the story with AssemblySoft then? What do you do? Like, what's the? I had a quick look at your website.
Yeah, so AssemblySoft started because I've been a contractor for the last 12 years. It's about 10 years perm, and then the last 12 or so years I've been contracting for different companies. And then we kind of, about a year ago, I really started kind of wanting to offer some of my skills to kind of a wider audience, and it just kind of grew from there, really. So I've continued my kind of contract career. It's just something that kind of sits in the background. So I don't take on an awful lot of clients.
Are you going to venture out into your own products, or are you going to just be servicing other companies, or?
Yeah, so I've started writing a few bits. It's always very difficult to kind of get things over the line. You can start something, make quite a lot of traction, but actually getting it to next stage is quite difficult. One of the presentations last month was a booking engine in Blazor. We've basically got a development partner for that, and so they're basically the use case for that application, and that's potentially something that could develop. Okay. Just conscious of time, Jeremy, are you around for part 2?
Yeah, I'm here.
Let's get on to some WASM.
All right. Yeah, this isn't quite so Linux heavy, this part, so that's that's good. Let's see. So,
and have you got your chat window as well open, Jeremy?
I do now, but I think when I start sharing, let's see.
Let's just make you. I'll make you co-host again. I just dropped you out of co-host at the end there, just so you could potentially see the window you had on before. So there you go.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. And my chat window's gone again. Let's see if I can. See, there's a little hotkey that usually works for the chat window. It's, Alt-H. Oh, there we go. Sweet. Yeah, before the Alt-H wasn't bringing it up, and now I can put it over here. So I have another project here, and this is the website of it. So I will just make, so I have a small little model here, and this is going to be my API URL, which will change this to Turkey demo. Yeah, Turkey demo. Copy this. Save it. Now, probably before I should start, I should talk about the why of why this part matters. So one of the coolest things about Blazor, in my opinion anyway, is the WebAssembly and the static site generation part of it. So what that means is, we no longer have to have ASP servers, which, ASP servers are great. I spent years and years dealing with IIS. I wrote, I think, 5 courses on IIS for Pluralsight. So I've definitely spent a lot of time in that world, and I love it. But the cool thing about Blazor is now we can just generate HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and it's static, and it uses WebAssembly and SignalR and all those cool things. So we don't have to, we're not stuck with just ASP on IIS anymore, which is great. But you can still use IIS. A lot of people don't know that IIS, when configured properly, is one of the fastest web servers in the world, faster than Nginx or Apache or any of those. And looks like my API is not coming up, so I will figure out why. Let's see. Oops. Developer tools, unhandled exception. Let's try running this as an application. I suspect those DNS problems are still coming back to haunt me, but we'll see here. That's my guess right now. So I'm going to go and make sure that my IP has not changed again. Back to Lightsail. Turkey demo. 53, 234. Looks like it's the same one, so that's good. Looks like I have to reconnect. So something weird happened here. We'll see. Said my Lightsail servers haven't been doing so hot today. Two. And I did see an alert on my phone that there was a big outage, but I don't know if it's affecting, I don't think it's affecting AWS, but. I may have to connect it to Turkey Test, which this is the one I put together yesterday, the exact same way. Let's see if Turkey Test works. That one's still working. Try Turkey Demo again. Let me in. Just great. Okay. Might just connect it to the Turkey Test server, which is identical, but this one seems to be choking. My DNS is resolving properly, but it looks like that server is down and out. So I will point it towards the other server, which is the same. Just change demo to test and fire it. And this one appears to be working. So this is our actual WebAssembly application. And like I said, you could actually combine these into two and make it a Blazor server app. But with it separate, I can do the static site generation part and move those static files elsewhere. So here we just have a basic little application where we can add our foods that we would like. Excuse the giant refresh on the delete. I slapped this thing together and for some reason it wasn't updating the DOM. So I just put a manual refresh in there when I delete it. But yeah, this is just the basic WebAssembly application. And what we'll do is we will deploy it. If I can get that server back up, we'll deploy it to that server in the Nginx. We'll use the Nginx static site functionality to host this. And if we can't get that to work, we'll put it somewhere else. So let's see. So using IS Express, we'll make sure it works here. Okay. Sweet. So let's see if I can connect to that server again. Giving it a few minutes here and it should. I'm going to try rebooting it. Anytime a Linux person tells you you never have to reboot, you can go back and look at this as proof that it absolutely helps sometimes. You don't have to reboot as often, but it certainly helps. And I got to watch that IP address to make sure it doesn't change on me again. Let's see if we can connect. If we can't, then I'll just go to the Turkey test server and show how we can deploy this over there. So we'll go to my other Git repo and I will make this, I'll make this one public too. So Turkey time web. Oh, it looks like our server is up. Perfect. Just needed a reboot. Okay, cool. So I'm going to check and make sure my services are still up. Next, looks like Nginx is running. And Turkey API is dead for some reason. So we'll start that up. Give it a second. Okay. Now let's go to Turkey demo and see. Oh, I think it's already, yeah, it's already back up. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my original WebAssembly project here, and we'll put in the Turkey demo, which is the service that we just stood up earlier. And I'll commit that and push it. Let's see, it's already here. Now we've got that pushed up to GitHub. We'll do another check. Since we're all developers, you know why I'm checking this over and over. Just to know exactly where it breaks if it does break, but it looks like we're back up and running. So I've got that pushed over to Git. And get rid of these API silly things. Repos again. Now what I'm going to do is clone this Turkey Time web. We're going to clone our web application over. Oh, and it's asking username and password, so I better push that over so I'm not showing my credentials. Okay. So now we have Turkey Time Web. And we could do a .NET build here just to make sure it builds if we'd like. And I will have to remember the default directory for Nginx. So if you remember, our Nginx page is here. It just says welcome to Nginx. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our static files from this in this directory. So we'll be serving up just using static service, no .NET or proxies or anything like that. And it looks like I'm already frozen here. Actually, I'll just do a real build for it. And so what I've done is just clone down the project from GitHub and we'll build it really quick. And I'm going to open another window if it will allow me to. There definitely seems to be some problems with this server in particular, but I think we can do this. So I'll jump over, just to save time, we'll jump over to another server. See what's going on with this thing. And there's another joke in the programming world. It's always DNS. I think that's what's going on right now. Is I think having to change that DNS. It's only been up for an hour, so I think it's still propagating through all the different servers. And not happy with me. I'm not sure why rebooting helped, but so I'm going to change this web again to turkey test. Let's see, because I'm guessing it's not going to work. I think the servers stopped serving again. Yep. Test. Okay, this one seems to be working. Now close out of there and go to that other server. Okay. Here I will go to repos. Actually, I'm going to make these. I'm going to make this font a little bit bigger because I'm pretty sure nobody will be able to see anything if I don't. What is it? Appearance. Change that to 20. There we go. That's a little bit better. We'll pretend we're on the other server, but repos, turkey time web, get pull down these new changes. Okay. So from here, we pulled down the latest copy of it, so I can do a build. We'll publish on this. Configuration, release. Since this server seems to be behaving, this should only take a few seconds. And one thing I should show on the Windows side while this thing is going is I have it here, and I can do the same thing here, .NET publish, configuration, release. And just to kind of prove that we're only using static files, I will go into this folder. www root. And here are my static files. And I'm using something called serve. So if you do a npm install serve and you have npm on your machine, it's a static file server that just serves up regular HTML files, things like that. So if I go to localhost 5000, there's my site, which doesn't appear to be connecting to the API, but oh, there we go. And so this is just a static, like I said, it's npm install serve. It's a cool little serve thing if you like just build an HTML, index HTML and use it, it'll serve on localhost 5000. It's kind of a cool little utility. But sometimes I do that just to make sure that everything that's in this folder is actual static files, because if there's anything that requires ASP.NET Core or requires some kind of interpreter or anything like that, it will not run with this npm serve. So just kind of doing a little sanity check there. And okay, and this thing also died on me. It's not a great advertisement for light sail. See if I can get either of these silly things to connect. Now the old one's connected. Perfect. Web. Actually, I'm going to need to change that again. Let me verify. Here's our Nginx page. So to further confuse things, we're back on the old server that wasn't working because the test server isn't working. So verify. Our API works. But we still just have the static welcome to Nginx page, so we'll change that. Go back into the web. In the right folder. Yeah. Okay. Push that over. We'll do the git pull, and we'll pull the changes down to this machine.
Yeah, Dominic and Carl just highlighted it'd be nice to have maybe a little sidebar or something in the command prompt to kind of speed up some of the snippets. You know, write them once and kind of forget.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'll publish an article with all of this too, all of the combined craziness of them here. Let's see. Oh yeah, .NET publish. Hopefully this will build without freezing up the whole machine this time. Which generally I haven't experienced this before. Usually these little machines, I have the little $3 machine, they usually do pretty well. So I don't know if I'm taxing it too hard or if there's a DNS issue or what. It looks like it absolutely does not like the .NET restore when I do it. So maybe I'll just skip to putting it on AWS, this thing. One of these things will wake up. And generally, this is just a few minutes. So while this thing is building, let's drop it on AWS. So if you've ever used S3 buckets are a cool way to host static files. So you can't run anything on S3 other than index.html and stuff behind it. So anything that's flat files, static files, you can run HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that's it. So you can't run any Python, Perl, PHP, ASP, any of that kind of stuff. But it's a really fast way to host just static files, and luckily Blazor outputs static files. So we'll call this turkey time. I'm a little scared of the Oregon US West region right now, but if you turn off, and anytime you do this with an S3 bucket, there's two different ways to make it public for everybody. So an S3 bucket's just a storage space. Most of the time with AWS, people use it for storing things like images, videos, all kinds of stuff. And you can set your permissions so that the general public can't get to these things. When you're doing a static site, of course, you want the general public to be able to get to these things. So it shows you all kinds of warnings like this, like, hey, you're making this public people will be able to see it. But just create an S3 bucket, made it public. And we go over here to properties. And it says static website hosting. We'll enable that. And we'll just have it host a static website. Type in index.html. I don't actually have an error HTML, but it requires it. So we'll put that in there. And then save changes. And now we have a bucket here that we can upload things to. And we can upload our little Blazor site. And I've already got it open here. Release. Publish. So I'll upload these, and then I'll add our framework and CSS. Okay. And now we're uploading the static artifacts that came from our little Blazor web application here. Check on my servers, see if they're still, they appear to be hung up for the time being. Okay, upload succeeded. So then I will go into this bucket, select all, and go make public. And this is all you have to do to set up a static Blazor WebAssembly application on AWS S3. So if we scroll down here, we should have a URL. Yep. And there's our static site running on AWS S3. However, it looks like it's not finding my API, of course. Let's go ahead and just reboot both of these. And maybe one of them will come up and start serving as we sit here. Now, one thing you might notice, so with this S3 hosted site, this is a really, really cheap and fast way to host your Blazor WebAssembly items. So you can fill up, it's pretty much unlimited how much you can put into S3, but S3, depending on the style of storage you go with, can be really fast and really cheap. Now, if you want it to be lightning fast all the time, it's a little more expensive, but if you want to do something like Glacier, where it's a little bit slower for storage, you can do that as well. Well, one of the problems is it's not secure. You can see here that it's not a secure site. So S3 doesn't support HTTPS. However, CloudFront does. Go to aws.com. And here's the reason you would want to use CloudFront is not just for the HTTPS. It's also, the way CloudFront works is there's a set of edge servers that are all over the world. So like I'm going to push these files up, and then if you guys bring it up over there in the UK, it's going to come from UK servers once the distribution goes out. So you'll actually be grabbing my static little Blazor files from somewhere, in Europe. And so that's one of the coolest things about it. Now here I've got Turkey Time S3, Amazon. Don't think I have to change my origin path. And I'm going to redirect HTTP to HTTPS. And here's where I could put in a domain name, like if this is, I can point any domain name to it and then generate a certificate from it. Just like we did with Let's Encrypt earlier, it actually uses the same system basically to make custom certificates. So default root object will be index.html. And I think that's all I have to do for this. And we'll give this a minute. So this is a really good way to host your Blazor WebAssembly very fast. One of the other ways I was going to show is using Netlify, and Netlify is what I use to host my personal blog. Also, and Netlify also uses edge servers. It uses really compressed, really fast connections. And I have been able to get Blazor WebAssembly apps on there, but today when I was doing it, it requires GitHub Actions. So Netlify generally uses Linux-based tools to generate things and upload them. But if you turn those builds off, and you allow GitHub builds to build it, GitHub will build the application and then push it over to Netlify. But like I said, I tried it last night and this morning, and both times it hung up and didn't go anywhere. So I even tried just starting a brand new Blazor app with nothing, nothing big happening with it, just the basic Blazor app, and it wouldn't build it. So just know that it's an option. It's maybe not a good option, but
Jeremy, quick question from a comment raised from Patrizia regarding Lightsail. In terms of kind of tracking down some of these, freezes and whatnot, in terms of like CPU monitoring, is there any monitoring tools that you can see to kind of understand and dig a little bit deeper?
I do believe there are some metrics here. Oh, yeah, so that's what our problem is my CPU utilization. So whoever Patrizio brought that up, that's absolutely what the problem is. Which is kind of interesting because I've done this quite a bit and it hasn't been that big of an issue. So I'm wondering if the .NET publish is just taking up too much CPU power, because as we can see here, it has spiked drastically. So yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, it does have some metrics here. And so the $3.50 server may not be so great for builds. Might have to go to the $5 one. Yeah, that's quite a bit up there as far as CPU usage, which I wouldn't have anticipated it being that high. Let's go back and see. This is our Turkey demo. Let's see if it's back up. Looks like it. Some kind of log here might tell me. Let's look at last log. I'm going to show in here. So let's see if it built. It probably didn't build because it was probably hanging when I rebooted it. Just for fun, let's see if it built. Yep, doesn't look like it built anything. So I will kick off a build on this and see if it kind of chokes its way through it by the time our CloudFront comes up and everything. There we go. Now our CloudFront has been enabled, so we can go here and grab our domain name. And it's grabbing the service. I don't remember if we were calling, which one we're calling here. Turkey demo. So that is the service that we stood up about an hour ago. And it looks like it is connecting to it. And then I get an access denied. Which I'm not sure why that just happened. But let's make sure I've got the right URL here. Oh, okay, so my home, I see my home needs to be set, but add a food item. This is what most of my test data looks like. And yeah, this is a really cheap and easy way to store. And like I said, it's using Edge servers, so I can post this thing in the chat room. Oops. I didn't really make a URL quite the way I wanted it to. And this should take you to a close Edge location, and it should be just super fast. Let's go to web page test. And I spent a lot of time on webpagetest.org. I would recommend it to anybody who's trying to make their applications fast. Let's see how quick our little Blazor app loads up. And I'm going to check on, and this one's still doing the restore, so I'm guessing it's just pegging that CPU, if I had to guess. So instead of making everybody wait for it, basically what I do is, so do the .NET publish with the release publish. And yeah, this is actually a pretty poor score on here for some reason. But you can test your speeds with web page test. It works pretty good. But what I do is the .NET publish, configuration release, build those artifacts, and then copy those artifacts to var www HTML, which is the Nginx home, and then Nginx will serve it up, just like CloudFront here is serving it up. So instead of that basic Nginx page, it will load up something like this CloudFront page. And so that's one of the cool things, like I said about Blazor, I think that's one of the biggest, most revolutionary things is with the WebAssembly. This kind of code is super simple. You'll find out if you download the app, it's not complex by any means. But it's super simple stuff where we can just connect to any API externally. So you can use things like this CloudFront, you can use Google's engine, you can use Azure. Azure has some static website services that are very, very fast. They don't require IaaS overhead, so it's not super expensive. So the best use case for this is, if you're a small company or organization, you've got a set of small websites that don't require giant scaling, they don't require a lot of really complex things, you could host this on, say, like this at AWS Lightsail or some Linux server, host your API, and then you could use a series of places like this CloudFront or something like that. Any static file hosting, even GitHub hosting, you can do GitHub static pages. I don't remember what I have on mine. Yeah, I have something silly on here from years ago, but you can use your GitHub static hosting and host Blazor applications on it in WebAssembly. So it was really cool. I saw, Carl, you brought up that Blazor games. It's really cool because you can take those Blazor games, and if they're pure WebAssembly, you can deploy them all over the place. And it's just a good, cheap, easy way to deploy. And I think the biggest why for me is performance and then cost. Because I think we've all been in that situation where things are just super expensive. So they're like, oh, we'll put it on an IS server. And when we were first doing transformations into the cloud, and I was a consulting engineer, I remember it being very expensive up front because we had a bunch of ASP.NET apps. We have C# services running, and we had to convert all of that stuff to Azure as we're moving. And there was just all these expensive services and programs. And there was a lot of people saying, I don't know if we need all this. And the truth is that we probably didn't. However, that move to the cloud, is inevitable. It's going to come in handy. It's going to be something you want later. Nowadays, we've moved to where those services are so much more granular and task-based that the cost is so much lower. So if you have this simple little Blazor application, you can host it on Azure, AWS, any of those at a very reasonable cost, and you're not paying for giant complex services when you don't need them. You need a static hosted app, and you need something that'll run .NET Core. So it's good for cloud transformations wherever your organization is at in your cloud transformation. There's just a ton of options out there, and that's one of the things that I'm so excited about was Blazor. I spent years with ASP.NET apps. I love them. I even liked MVC. I still kind of like MVC, even though I get a lot of flack for it. I still think MVC is pretty cool for rapid website development. But Blazor is like, if I were starting a greenfield or even, redoing something, I would strongly suggest going with Blazor for these reasons. Like being able to deploy the static app to CloudFront, it's fast for everybody, and being able to spin up small little services here and there, microservices. Everybody likes to talk about microservices now, right? And so .NET Core and eventually .NET 5. I did hear somebody complaining about converting .NET 5, and we're definitely experiencing that. Some people that I'm working with are experiencing the exact same thing. So yeah, it's a little scary, but once .NET 5, once all those wrinkles hammer out, I think we're looking at a lot of options for deploying our applications. So no more IIS servers, big giant iron IIS servers, and yeah, so I think that's about it. I can show my one last slide. I promised only 3 of them. Some presentations are all slides, and I like it when they're not. I think audiences probably like that too. So here's my last slide. Basically, thank you, and asking for any questions. I don't hear any audio. If you want, I can send you the big long list of commands I built. I can send those before I do, but I'm going to publish an article on jeremymorgan.com or pluralsight.com or both. Just kind of putting all of that stuff together, how to stand it up, start to finish. I'm on Twitter under Jeremy C. Morgan. I post a lot of tech stuff. I post a lot of random stuff. So the only thing I don't post is politics. So if you wanted to see, just tech talk and goofing around, follow me on there, and I'm pretty responsive to questions, either email or Twitter. So thank you for having me here, and I think the Turkey Time web, I don't think that one's public, but I'll make it public. So if people want to pull this apart and mess around with it. I'm going to do some more work to it too, because this was slapped together very quickly, as you'll see when you look at the code. But I'm going to keep working on this and kind of making it fancier. And I want to try to do some Signal R stuff with it at some point. But yeah, thank you for having me. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Jeremy, I was the one who going on about the .NET 5. I've been reading that .NET is going to be doing this yearly rollout. So .NET 6 is going to come out in November next year. Is that not going to be too intense?
Possibly, yeah. I think that might be a little scary. I
Like,
mean, I think
.NET 7 going to come out in November after as well, or?
yeah, it might be a thing like, the Angular team. I don't know how closely you all follow Angular or Angular development, but that's how it was the first few years of Angular. Is every new big release just broke everything, and then finally they've got it figured out to where now, the Angular releases roll out and they don't break a whole lot of things. So they'll still break some things, but so I'm hoping the .NET goes the same way. At some point they're like, these are small incremental changes. The deltas aren't huge. We're not going to break too much. That's what I'm hoping for. But I think that jump from 3 to 5 is just.
So do you think it'll be worth sort of waiting until 6, or?
I would. Like if I'm putting my consultant hat on, like Carl, and like I believe you said the same thing. Before I went on full time at Pluralsight, I did a lot of consulting and contracting work, and I preferred it because I could work a year or two in one technology or one space and then move, and it helped me grow and learn new things. So I think it's a lot better than spending 20 years at one spot where you do things the same way with the same tech. But anyway, so if I was putting my consultant hat on, I would say for production stuff, I would probably still wait just a little bit to watch everything hammer out. If you don't have anything that you really, really need from .NET 5, it would probably be best to
the only thing I've seen in the Blazor stuff is that you've got all of these CSS resources and JavaScript resource stuff, which looks quite nice. And I really wanted to use that, but then I had like this massive NuGet problem. So,
yeah. From my experience, .NET 5 is blisteringly fast compared to.
Second that.
So that's the problem with using loads of third-party packages that haven't been updated. There's some interesting things, not necessarily that people will use it, but whether you use gRPC for data transfer as well. The move from .NET 5 to 6 should be relatively simple, is what Microsoft.
Yeah, that's what I read on it. That's why it's kind of like worth maybe taking the route and going 5, ready for 6.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming, and then of course all the servers are going to transfer to ARM processors. So it's going to make our lives fun again. That's my official prediction. I could be wrong. Watch this video a year from now and be like, yeah, that was nonsense. But I don't know. I see that coming and causing a few headaches for some people. But
Windows 7 was once a big idea.
That's true. Very true. Windows 7 was great. I think Windows, like every other Windows release, is amazing. I've pretty much been using it since the 90s, and it's like, Windows 98 SE was probably the first really good Windows, and then it was kind of every other one. We have our Vistas and MEs, and yeah, every other release is good.
And don't forget the 640 kilobytes, which is much enough for space.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually when I started out as a teenager. We were using DOS. And I think it was DOS 3.1, which was ancient at the time, but that was the computer we had that on there. And so that's part of the reason I like the command line so much, I think, because that's how I started out, was command line everything. And then this new Windows 95 came out and forced me to
learned
use
on
it.
Windows 95 and give me a wizard any time of day or night.
Yeah.
Literally. It's like, for me, command line's actually like, well, you've given me this box, thanks very much. And then what do I do?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's too much.
Yeah, but
At least on
I-
the Wizard, you can always press enter.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for most things, I like a wizard also, and I really like the scaffolding like that Visual Studio provides. You know, a lot of people are moving away from Visual Studio and going into Visual Studio Code and things like that, or Vim, like I was using earlier. You know, some people are like, all you need is Vim. You don't need Visual Studio, but Visual Studio is awesome. And like the scaffolding and things that it provides, like right click, create controller. I mean, I know how to create a controller, but why should I have to if I can right click and select my context and hit generate, you know? It's like,
Yeah, there's like one of the developers I work with, he loves Notepad still. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? It just takes so much time. What are you on about? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, I've actually built my own templates in Blazor for pages, components, all this sort of stuff. So that I just literally right click, add an item, boom, off I go.
yeah.
You know? It's, yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you? But there's still people that like the roll-up windows in their cars. So you know, the rest of us like the power windows. There's still some people that like to crank the handle. Not much you can do.
Should we do another quick wheel, guys? Time for a tiny little break. Jeremy, it's been an absolutely fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Pretty good. Lots of detail. I think, you know, the thing is, when you want to go low cost, you've got to accept a little bit of pain. The tooling and the maturity. You know, we talk about certificates. You can get them for free, but you're going to have to work a bit for them. And you want to do hosting for next to nothing. You can't expect, you know, everything to be kind of rich. But I thought the buckets were great. The S3 buckets. I mean, that's so quick, isn't it? So easy if it fits.
Yeah, it's really easy and really fast, and I recommend that to people quite a bit when they're building smaller applications. It fits really well, and you can even do versioning in buckets, and you can use Amazon Code Build, which is something that I haven't done it with .NET, but I've done it with some other platforms. But with Code Build, you can have it pull from GitHub or you can store your code at Amazon, either one. And you can have it pull and build and push it to an S3 bucket all automatically, so that with every Git push, it automatically publishes it out. And that's pretty nice for
So all
simplicity.
the actions are working okay, yeah?
Yeah. The GitHub Actions does the same thing, but I wasn't able to get that working recently. So
excellent. I'm just going to override your screen share. Is that okay, Jeremy?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay. Here we go. I'll just check the names actually, just quickly. Have I got all the names right? Can you just check that your name is there? Give me a thumbs up. That would be awesome. Or a thumbs down if it's not, whatever. Whichever is the quickest route for that binary tree. Okay, cool. I think we've got everyone. I've left Mikkel in there as well because he pretty much was there to the last, and Ian as well, who kind of rode us out, and they need to leave and left a message in the chat for me. So here we go. Hey, well done, Graham. Graham, if you send me your details, I'll make sure that they get sent to you. What have we got? A unique set of Blazor stickers. Okay, there's a bit of a backstory on this one. These were handed out from C# Fritz's channel for some questions that were answered. It was when he was doing a Twitch show. But they are kind of one-offs. So there's like about 6 or 7 different ones that you can put on your laptop. They're quite cool.
Okay, thanks a lot.
But I should make sure if you ping me your address details, I'll make sure they make their way to you, Graham.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Of this evening, has anyone got any questions or anything else they'd kind of like to add? Obviously, we'd like to say thank you to you, Jeremy, and we'd love to have you back again at some point if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be pretty cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, appreciate the insights this evening. A lot of detail, probably a little bit more than we've had on some of the previous presentations. But you know what? When it comes to the implementation, the detail, that's when we'll be coming back to these videos and kind of looking at them in a bit more detail. So yeah, much appreciated.
Definitely. And I left my email address up there, and you can look at that again. But if anyone's interested in trying out Pluralsight, it's where that's where I work, my full-time job. I'm also an author there. And we have a ton of stuff with .NET. So Pluralsight actually started out as a .NET training company. Way back when, 15 years ago, they started doing C# and .NET things. So now we teach, Node and Python and Java and all these other different things. But at our core, we started as a .NET company. So it's still a big focus, and there's just a ton of stuff on Blazor and Azure and just all kinds of cool stuff. So if anyone's interested and doesn't have an account, wants to get like a free trial coupon, just shoot me an email and I'll set you up and you can check it out.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I think probably quite a few of us have utilized Pluralsight possibly in the past. I know some of my favorite authors have added content to Pluralsight, so yeah, much appreciated. Thank you. Well, I think we should let you enjoy a well-earned late lunch, Jeremy, and for the rest of us, it's probably time to start thinking about retiring. So once again, a final thank you, and much appreciated.
Thanks for having me. Have a nice evening, everyone.
If you have a technical topic that others could benefit from, whether it be .NET, Azure, or focus on Blazor, then reach out for a future presentation. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation as much as we did, and we look forward to seeing you next time.